My name is Anthony Flacavento. I am Executive Director of the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative and one of the co-founders, along with Erica Edelson, Cody Lawning, and others. And we are thrilled that for our December briefing, we have a presentation by Tom Moore. I'll tell you a little bit about Tom in just a moment. And we've titled it Making Citizens United Irrelevant Through a Corporate Power Reset. Now, if there's anything that could build a better society and politics and country, it would be figuring out a way to take most, if not all, corporate money, PAC money, dark money out of our political process. I don't think we'd get much disagreement on that one. And yet, for the last decade and a half or so, it seemed like an absolutely impossible proposition because of Citizens United and several decisions that led up to Citizens United, and then a Supreme Court that appears to be even more entrenched in the notion that rich and powerful people are rich and powerful because they're better than the rest of us, and therefore they should have unfettered speech through their money. It's really hurt our country so deeply. And I just out of the blue am on a webinar and hear this dude, Tom Moore, talking about a strategy that completely sidesteps Citizens United and yet would have profound consequences. I couldn't have been more thrilled. So I reached out to Tom. He's been terrific ever since and very eager and willing to share this strategy that he has developed with the Ruby family. Tom's a senior fellow at American Progress. His focus there is on government reform and democracy. Fair enough. From 2015 to 2023, he was chief of staff or counsel and chief of staff to the Federal Election Commission, Ellen Weintraub in particular, the commissioner. He has a BA in political science from Davidson and a law degree from Georgetown. He's also very grounded. He's been a city council member in the Rockville, Maryland City Council for a couple of terms, served on the board of Common Cause, and has done quite a bit of writing and editing for Congressional Quarterly and CNN in particular. So a man of great credentials, and at the same time, very unassuming, clearly a peer to all of us. So Tom, with that, please take it away.
Thank you, Anthony. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me here. There's so much bad news in the world, and especially sometimes in the campaign finance realm. And I am here to bring some good news. There is a way to get around Citizens United. You don't have to overturn it. You don't have to flip it. You don't have to wait for the Supreme Court to die and get new folks in there. And it's a power that the states have to do this, and that they've always had. And everyone's just kind of forgotten about it for the last century or so. But it's as strong as it ever was, and they've all reserved the right to use it whenever they want. Citizens United is the case, 2010, that where the Supreme Court said if corporations want to spend in elections independently, they have a perfect right to do so because they're going to do it independently, and if it's independent, it can't be corrupting. That's ridiculous on its face, but that is the law. So the that case, and there's a case in the 70s that dealt with ballot issues, has basically kind of opened the floodgates on dark money into our system. There was a case kind of later that year in 2010 that actually didn't go to the Supreme Court called Speech Now that actually created the super PACs that we see today. And that's been kind of a brick wall for the last 15 years. And people have lots of good folks are trying to do a constitutional amendment to basically say that money is not speech and corporations are not people, and that's a good effort. But that's going to take years and years, and you have to get three-quarters of the states to agree to it, and that's a tough prospect. And also, if you fight a holy war in a state to win passage of that, nothing happens in that state for until the rest of the states do it. This is a different reform, and this is not a campaign finance law reform. There's basically two sets of powers, two ways that states do things. You've got this regulatory side where you know people have all the power in the world; they're born with all this power, and then the state comes in and starts regulating things like okay, you can't murder people, you can't drive more than 80 miles an hour, you can't you got to pay your taxes, and that is kind of chipping it away at people's power and the rights. And what courts do in here is say like okay, like well this one was okay, you got to pay your taxes, but this one, you can't speak, you can't criticize the president. That was not okay. And so that's where all the action has been in rights and speech and everything, and especially with corporate speech and money in politics. This is an entirely different power of the states. This is over here. This is the state's affirmative power granting authority. Corporations are created by states. They are creatures of state law. They don't exist outside of state law, unlike people. They have looked like people for the last century or so because uh, when the states were racing each other to get to get all the corporate registrations in their state, they kept giving more and more and more to the corporations that register in their state until they finally got to the point where it's like, all right, we're going to give you everything. You can do anything that's legal. You have all the powers of a human being. And so, humans already started up here. Corporations, were put at this level, and that's where it stayed for the last century or so. But this was done for competitive reasons. There's no court that's ever said that any state has to give any corporation any power ever. Not They don't have to give them the power to own property. They don't have to give them the power to sign contracts. They could get rid of them at any moment. And there's a clause in every state's law that says we can change your powers or get rid of you at any moment. And the Supreme Court has said for 200 years that their authority to do that is almost absolute. Um, but no one's used it for the last century because all the powers were given away that it just kind of sat there and everyone kind of forgot that this authority still existed. Um, and the kind of money and politics crisis that we're finding ourselves in with super PACs and dark money groups just running rampant across our politics has kind of forced the issue. When I was at the Federal Election Commission, I worked for Commissioner Alan Weintraub, who's a legendary commissioner, fierce advocate for the rule of law and transparency and the agency and all that. She sent me out with a hammer to beat on Citizens United until I could come up with something. And we came up with a couple theories over the years that worked pretty well. After I left her office, I continued to work at the Center for American Progress, and about a year and a half ago came to this. And basically, what it is basically any state at any moment can change its law or its either its statutes or its constitution to say, hey, that big list of powers we gave you that included everything includes everything except the power to spend in politics. And that's it. If a state decides just not to affirmatively grant that power anymore, just kind of like make that power list a little bit shorter of what it gives its corporations, that is something that is virtually unreviewable by courts. I mean, there'll be plenty of lawsuits over this, but it is an incredibly strong authority, and it's totally different line of cases than Citizens United. It's this foundational corporation law that is the basis of how all American corporations are created and run. And kind of what it boils down to is, and it's kind of an interesting a new kind of way of thinking about it is like corporations are created by us, by the people, as through our state governments to help us to make life better, to allocate capital more efficiently, to provide employment, to provide stability to the economy. But at the end of the day, it's to make life better for us. And they are our creations. We are Frankenstein, and that's Frankenstein's monster. And if our monster is wrecking our politics, we have the authority, and we reserve the authority in our laws to say, like, okay, we're going to redefine you, and you can't do that anymore. And that's basically what is happening here. Um, I'm working with folks in 17 states right now to get this moving at different levels of engagement. It is furthest along in Montana. The Montana plan is a constitutional ballot initiative that's going to go on the 2026 ballot in Montana. And it basically amends the Montana Constitution to say, like, yep, we just shortened that list and corporations can't spend in our state anymore. There's another provision that is in almost every state's law and can be added to the ones that don't have it that says and this is kind of this is what makes the whole thing work. It says no out-of-state corporation can exercise any power in this state that a domestic corporation can't exercise. So if Montana were to pass this, then every uh, corporation chartered in Montana would lose the power to spend in politics anywhere in Montana, anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the universe. They're out altogether. But also, 49 states worth of out-of-state corporations would lose the power to spend in Montana's local, state, and federal politics because their authority to do that comes from the state of Montana. Even if you're a Delaware corporation, you get your existence from Delaware. But if you want to operate in Montana, you got to talk to Montana and you got to play by their rules. And as long as they're treating Montana corporations and out-of-state corporations the same, they're on pretty solid ground. So that's what's happening in Montana. I'm I've been spent most of my week helping legislators draft legislation for their states. It was supposed to be, I haven't heard yet today, but it's supposed to be introduced in New York. It might be introduced in a handful of states for the next couple of weeks. But it can move in any state. Every state has the ability to do this. And any state that makes this move immediately cleans up its ballot issues and its local, state, and federal elections from all corporate money and all dark money, because all dark money comes through nonprofit C4 corporations. They don't, they're supposed to be social welfare groups. After Citizens United and Speech Now, they became these kind of engines for dark money. But this would stop them in their tracks. They would no longer have the power to spend in politics. That's basically it. I mean, one of the questions I get is, why did it take 15 years to get to this? It seems so simple. Why did anybody think of it before? Like, I don't know. I feel very fortunate to have unearthed it, and very fortunate to have the opportunity like this to speak to folks to get them excited about it. But that's basically it. I have answered hundreds of questions on this, and I would be perfectly happy to answer 100 more from you guys today. But that's the at Center for American Progress, we call it the corporate power reset. And I've got a very long paper I'll put in the notes that if you want to check it out, it's got all the details. But I'm happy to take your questions.
Wow, that was a lot packed into a short amount of time. Thank you, Tom. What we'll do, I have a question or two just to get started, and then Erica's going to help looking for questions in the chat. And this is the way we always do it at Ruby. Folks can also raise your hand. Probably better to use the virtual signal because we may not see it if you just raise your hand briefly. So you can ask questions verbally or you can put them in the chat. But I'm going to start us off with a couple. So the first is if this is state law. Let's say it passes in Montana in 2026, which would be fantastic. Can it then be challenged in federal court? Like, is it possible to imagine it being worked up to the Supreme Court?
Well, it will be challenged in federal court within 10 seconds of passing,
Oh,
and it will almost certainly go to the Supreme Court. And actually, something been working on this week. I haven't written about it yet. There are some very powerful, just the way this is set up, and the authorities that are being employed here by the state. With abstention doctrines and state certifications and that kind of thing, the courts may not have much to say about it because it really is a matter of state law, not federal law. But yeah, there'll be a challenge immediately, and we're preparing for that, getting ready. One of my jobs over the next couple of years is going to be to defend it against that kind of challenge as best as I can.
okay. I saw in the chat before I turned it over to Erica to look, somebody was asking which states are in these 17 states you're working with.
I
Is that in
knew someone
the
would
paper,
ask.
or if you can somehow let us know so people know whether their state's already kind of engaged or needs to start?
Yeah, let me put it this way: no matter where you are, it could be Montana's pretty set. Other than that, no matter where you are, here's the list of states. Um, uh, uh, you're getting in on the ground floor. We've
Okay.
only been at this for about 2 or 3 months or so, and something about the strategy here. Basically, A lot of folks don't like this. Unions are wrapped into this. They are corporations. They'll have to go back to what they did before Citizens United and raise money from their PAC and spend from their PAC. Just like corporations will not be able to spend money out of their treasuries to have to raise money through PAC. Legislative leaders are not wild about this in blue states or red states. They don't like taking money out of their pockets. So the emphasis has been on ballot initiative states. And basically, if you can get this on the ballot, like you will get the signatures and you will get the votes, and this will pass overwhelmingly in any state that's out there. Wherever it's on the ballot, this will pass. But there is this opportunity to get it in legislatures and get it in front of legislatures. So either they can pass it, like maybe Vermont might pass it very quickly because they're all into this. But other legislatures like kind of let it perk for a couple of years. That's usually how things move in legislatures. And when it does shoot this to the Supreme Court, which I expect it will, if the Supreme Court clears it, then the day after that is when every legislator in the country is going to get a call saying, you need to do this right now. So it'll be good for them to have a bill in the hopper already.
Okay. And one last question for me, and then we'll turn it over to others. So do you see I mean, obviously the process itself is different between us, what is it, 23 or 24 states, slightly less than half that have a ballot initiative. Um, there, it's more a matter of kind of old-fashioned lobbying to get states with a legislative process, but no ballot initiative on board with this. Do you think it's fundamentally different in any way between the two states?
Um, I think it's a tougher lift in legislative states if you have to go to the legislature. Just because, again, leadership is not wild about it. You will find some people who will do it. And it may be one of these things. I'll drop a bunch of resources in the chat. Issue one paid for a poll in Montana and nationally last in October, um, and basically found incredibly strong support across the parties, across every demographic for every bit of this. High 70s basically. Um, this is something that it might be one of these things where you start waving some of those numbers in front of state legislators, and they may find it irresistible to go after something like this because it's incredibly popular. And this bridges Republicans and Democrats. It absolutely will bridge rural and urban areas. But old folks, young folks, like nobody likes any of the stuff that they've been seeing for the last 15 years.
Great. Okay, so Barbara has a question, and Erica probably has some from the chat as well. Barbara, go ahead.
Tom, I'm curious to know, the Citizens United came out of Lewis Powell's memo back in the 70s. If that had not taken place, do you think that some form of Citizens United would have come to pass?
Probably. Basically, this is all stemming from Buckley v. Vallejo, which was a 1976 case that basically said the only way we can regulate campaign finance, regulate it, is to stop corruption or the appearance of corruption. And the court has kind of narrowed that over and over and over again in the years since then. And in some ways, Citizens United is kind of almost a natural extension of that. So and that case was very strange because it was about a movie about Hillary Clinton, and there was more a question about disclosure. And basically, geez, now I forget which justice it was, but there was a pretty reasonable decision made, written, I think, by Roberts, and then somebody else came in with one. Oh, Anthony Kennedy. Sorry, Anthony Kennedy came in with one that was just like blew it wide open and said, like, we can use this case to just you do the thing we've always wanted to do and let corporations spend all they want. And so the case got re-argued in the fall term of that year, and they did this incredibly expansive decision instead of the fairly narrow things that the case was all about. That indicates to me that they were itching to do it, and they were going to do it eventually, one way or the other.
Yeah, and of course, what I'll add is we need to be like normal countries with 6-week elections and no money in the system. This is killing the system. I say we're the constituency when it comes to voting. Then once whomever is elected, then it becomes the corporations and the people who gave them money are their constituents.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much for
Thank
what
you.
you
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Erica, some questions from the chat?
Yeah, let me group a few together. Would this apply? What kind of corporations would this apply to? Would it include like C3s, and LLCs?
Yeah.
And then also, what about corporations that are incorporated in Delaware?
Yeah. So yes, I mean, you could write this any way you want, but the most fair way to do it and the most probably judicially strong way to do it is to just wrap in everybody. Um, in Montana, it's for-profit corporations, all nonprofits. So that's C3s, which are also already not allowed to spend in politics, but the Trump administration's been making some moves on that. C4s, which are the dark money groups, C5s, which are unions, C6s, which are professional associations like Chamber of Commerce, that kind of thing. All of those. It's LLPs, LLCs, unincorporated associations because they get some goodies from the government in exchange. The government, they're for the powers that the government gives them. Basically, and the way they did in Montana is anybody who's either created by the state or receives benefits from the state, like limited liability or perpetual life, things like that, falls into this. It is. At the Center for American Progress, we kind of sat on it for a couple months because everyone was kind of like, all right, so tell us how it's going to hurt all of their dark money, but not hurt any of our dark money. It's like, okay, actually, there's no way to do that. That's not fair. And actually, our dark money spent on behalf of Democrats and progressives is just as corrosive to the whole political process as the money spent on the other side. So, the best way to do this is to just absolutely go across the board.
And Delaware, did you address
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Delaware?
Delaware. So I got a call from a state senator in Delaware, and he's like, "Hey, can we do this?" And I was like, "You're never going to be able to do this. They don't have ballot issues. It needs a two-thirds vote in each house to change their corporation code. They very jealously guard that. It is their crown jewel. It is so much of their revenue. It is so much of how the state defines itself. And they're under attack from Texas and Nevada." For these corporate registrations. So they are not in any mood to loosen things up right now. But one of the great things about this is you don't need Delaware. My stretch goal is, I'm on a 50 state strategy. I want to pass this, everywhere. Really, it's a 49 state strategy, but it doesn't matter if Delaware never passes this because if you're in Iowa and Iowa passes this, Iowa corporations are out of all politics everywhere, but 49 states worth of out-of-state corporations, including every Delaware corporation, can no longer spend in Iowa's politics. And so it's like unlike the federal constitutional amendments where you have to wait for everybody else to pass it in order to get any benefit at all. If Montana votes for this in the beginning of November 2026, this goes into effect January 1st, 2027. And they have cleaned up their politics that fast. So it's one of those kind of sweet things about this is you do not need Delaware to do it.
Amazing. And so then I take it that would apply to national PACs as well. Someone asked
So
about.
actually, so it doesn't. So PACs are political action committees. They are political committees. Political committees are actually not included in this. Political committees. Um, PACs are corporate PACs, that kind of thing. They've definitely got their problems, but they're kind of a frequent target of folks because they can be targeted. They are regulated, so they could be more regulated. Okay, but PAC money is actually compared to all this dark money that's flowing through and all this unaccountable stuff. It's actually not bad. I mean, PAC money is usually limited on the how much you can put in and how much you can spend out. And it's all disclosed. Even super PACs, they don't have any of the contribution limits or expenditure limits, but every cent that goes into a super PAC is disclosed. The problem with super PACs is that if you've got a dark money C4 giving money to the super PAC discloses the name of all their donors, but it's just this one dark money group that doesn't have to disclose any of its donors. So it's the combination of the two that is a very big problem. So this does not, I mean, political committees are literally created to spend in politics. That's the only thing they're allowed to do. Super PACs, literally the only thing they're allowed to do are do independent expenditures in politics. So this doesn't cover them, and you don't want this to cover them either.
Can I ask a quick question following up on that? And then maybe we could go to Robert and then come back to the chat questions. Have you all done some analysis about kind of, I don't know what to call it, but almost like a critical mass of how many states you would need to have adopted this, whether through a ballot initiative or through their legislature, to fundamentally shift this, but where it becomes almost diminishing returns for states to try to spend because 10 of the states where they do business in, they can no, have you thought about
Yeah,
that?
not really. I mean, the more the way I've thought of it is if we get this on the books somewhere and it goes to the Supreme Court and they clear it. That's the only, like for me, the critical mass is one, because that's what I need to get this to the Supreme Court, and we'll see what they do with it when it gets there. Um, so it doesn't. I mean, the difference between this and a lot of other things, like if we were doing clean air regulations, it's kind of like, all right, get California in and New York in and Texas in, and all of a sudden you've got all these people and you've cleaned the air, even if not every state does it. This is a little different. Every state that passes this cleans its political air 100%. So, if Rhode Island wants to do this, that's great, because this will totally help every citizen of Rhode Island, or every resident of Rhode Island, and clean up their politics. So it's not, even if Montana's the only state that ever passes this, this will be a good thing for Montana. I don't expect that'll be the case, but it's it's a good question, and I have thought about that, but I don't think it's a critical mass question.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Robert. Thanks for waiting, Robert.
Hi, thanks for giving me a chance to ask a question. It seems to me to be a states' rights argument going back to the 10th Amendment.
Yep.
And, if I recall, of course, there's been a lot of states' rights. States' rights have been overturned throughout
Sure.
American history. There was a case back in 1944, Smith versus Allwright. There used to be, I'm sure you know about this. There used to be primaries, white primaries in 7 southern states. And it's really awful because if you weren't legally white, you weren't allowed to vote in the Democratic Party, right? And then in
Hmm.
1944, the Roosevelt Court overturned that in the case Smith versus Allwright or something like that. And so my question is, if states' rights has been overturned in the past, as it has repeatedly, and when you
Yeah.
consider how different this Supreme Court is from the Supreme Court we had in the Roosevelt era,
Sure.
why wouldn't these justices, 7 of them on that particular side, why wouldn't they go back to the states' rights and say that we can overturn this with the First Amendment, which of course now it's been defined as speech is money as well,
Yeah.
which turns
No,
us
no, no.
into an oligarchy, So
Right.
I'd really like to hear your answer on that. Thank
Sure.
you.
So, yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So, when that's happened, when usually there's federal supremacy, and the Supreme Court can say, no, 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 this thing that you're doing at the state level conflicts with federal law, and we have supremacy, so you can't do that. Um, with corporate creation law, it is all state law. There is no competing federal law, so there is no law for the Supreme Court to drop on top of that. And it's the there's a metaphor I use. Robert, I'll make you the guinea pig for this. And it's the difference between rights and powers, and this is why, if the Supreme Court is talking about rights, it may not matter. So, Robert, do you have the power to fly? And I mean flap your arms and fly.
I haven't tried it since I was 5 years old and I jumped off a roof.
Well, uh,
Didn't work.
I'll call that a no. We
Okay.
were not, as humans, given the power by our creator to fly. We are entities that do not have that power. We can't do it. And Robert, if the Supreme Court came to you and said, Robert, you have a constitutional right to fly, would you, reclaim your 5-year-old self and go to the roof and give it a shot again?
Probably not.
Yeah. And of course not, because whatever a court says about the right to do something, if you don't have the power to do it, if you're defined as an entity by your creator as something that can't do it, It doesn't matter what the right is. You might have the right to do it. You might not have the right to do it. It doesn't matter. You are an entity that's defined as not being able to do it, and that's what this reform does. And so it's not even clear to me that this is touchable by the federal courts, because you don't have the right to speak unless you are an entity that is empowered to speak. And we. Everyone's kind of confused corporations and people through all this time, but it's like you would never ever say that about people. People have all the powers. They're born with all their powers. There's nothing about our powers that ever change. We have all of our powers, but corporate powers are absolutely shiftable, and that's what makes this a very different set of facts. And every case the Supreme Court has seen for the last 50 years, or really 100 years, where a corporation showed up as a plaintiff, they were a corporation that was fully empowered by their state to do anything legal, to do anything that a human can do. If a corporation walks into a state that's given a slightly shorter list of powers, that's a fundamentally different plaintiff. And the court has never, ever, ever said that states have to give any of their corporations any particular power or any powers at all.
Well,
So, Robert, I'm going to ask
I have a
Robert if
follow-up
you'll.
question, if
Yeah,
I
you can do a
could.
follow-up, but we got a lot of
Okay,
folks
yeah,
in queue.
right.
Real quick, please.
My follow-up question would be, I think it was a case back in the late 1800s, and it concerned the Southern Pacific Railroad and Santa Clara County, and
Yep.
it was really the Supreme Court, wasn't it, that ruled that corporations corporations are in fact persons, which is crazy, but that's what they did. And
Not
but
exactly,
that was
but
the courts too. So that's the last question I'm going to ask, and I really would like to hear your answer. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Let me put it, actually, I've looked at that case and I know why it doesn't apply, and it's not occurring to me right now why it doesn't apply. But I'd be happy to tell you later. Go check my notes. But the basically one of the things about it is like all these cases that we've seen, they all have to do with corporate rights. And if you have the power, and all these corporations have had the power, then you must have the right. But if you don't have the power, whole different ball of wax. And that's what. And I think even with that case, I think they're talking about rights, but they weren't talking about the authority of the state to set the powers of the corporations that they create.
That was a
So,
note in that decision. It wasn't literally in the
Yeah,
decision, but
that's
there was a note in the margin.
sidebar. Yeah.
all
Okay.
right, there's some
We're
better
gonna
lawyers than me here. Okay, good.
I'm not.
now. Okay, so we're gonna keep moving. I want to go to
Thank you,
Sue,
Barbara.
and then we'll go
Thank
back
you.
to the questions.
Thanks, Robert.
So,
Sue, you need to come off mute.
I got
Yeah.
it. Okay, thanks. And I am in Montana, working some with Jeff, Megan, and Tom lately. So this has been really a nice opportunity. So something that's been on my mind, Tom, that I'm wondering about is the effect on individual spending. So if someone's a billionaire and
Yep.
wants to continue to spend, that's what I'm wondering about. And then what I'm curious about then is it's kind of frustrating that if that's the case, that there is still that big conduit for money. And
Yeah.
based on money having a right, that it's tied in with rights. So I'm wondering if there's a way to get, if that's the case, that there's a way to get money to be considered also just to be a thing, and an argument that can, or a way of doing the same thing to money that that apparently the corporate charter can do. Like, is there somewhere in like how money is used that we can just say, well, you just can't use money this way, it's a thing?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. Thank you. So it's a different nut to crack.
Yeah.
My thing, undoes Citizens United, which has been pretty bad. But this one, what you're talking about, goes back to Buckley v. Vallejo, where they basically said you can't limit people's expenditures. That was another part of the case. And so, like, the court would have to overturn that, and that is unlikely. Or let me put it this way: I've not figured out a way to get around it yet. But there are efforts to knock back super PACs, because before super PACs were created by courts, individuals could spend whatever they wanted, but if they did it with more than one person, they were a political committee and they had to report everything, and there were limits and so forth. The super PACs are what kind of messed all of that up. Professor Larry Lessig, a Harvard law professor, he got a ballot initiative through Maine that basically said we're going to regulate super PACs like regular PACs. Nobody can spend $250 million in a race, and that got struck down by a district court as they had to do it in Maine. It's now before the First Circuit. And I actually wrote an amicus brief for that, supporting this move. That's the kind of route that it's going to take to undo that. What this will do, what the corporate power reset will do, is it can't stop somebody from spending $250 million on a race. It can stop them from doing it anonymously. They will no longer be able to launder their money through organizations. And that's pretty much what we've seen for the last 15 years. Elon Musk was the great exception. Like usually rich folks do not want their names attached to things. And actually, after Musk spent all that money in the presidential race, he spent a bunch of money in the Michigan Supreme Court race in the spring and, got his head handed to him. It was very, very unpopular. So, there's a good reason rich people don't like to attach their names to the money they spend. This would force them to do it. It can't stop them from spending. This discrete reform can't stop them from spending, but it can keep them from doing it secretly.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thanks,
the
Sue.
question. Let's go back to the chat. We've got Constance and Gilles in the waiting, but we'll go back to the chat for a bit. Erica?
Okay, well, we've got a whole bunch of people who are fired up to get this thing passed. And so they want to know what can they do to help if they're in Montana? And then people in other states were also asking if there's some kind of toolkit that they could bring to friendly legislators or in their state. I guess that would be in non-ballot initiative states where it would have to pass via the legislature.
Yeah. So I'm going to put in the chat, it's the Transparent Election Initiative. That is Jeff Mangan's group in Montana. And he and I are both working in others, trying to get it moving in other states as well. And actually, there will soon be model legislation that you can take to any state. One of the kind of cool things about this, I've drafted up a bunch of different versions of this in the last couple of weeks. Everybody's got the same language, just about, and this basic structure that's kind of been built to avoid judicial scrutiny. Can pretty much be dropped into any state's laws. So go to it's either montanaplan.com or transparentelection.org. In the next couple of weeks, we will have a model legislation there for you. I will toss my email into the chat. Give me a holler, and I may have written something up already. But it's basically, I mean, one of the things that's kind of cool is I was talking to some folks in Colorado, and one of the senators said, I've heard from like 3 different constituents and all different, from 3 different areas about this. Like the word is getting out, and legislators are starting to hear about it. And if they hear about it from you, everybody on this call, that will make a difference. That really will. If you've got a common cause chapter in your state, talk to them about it. If you've got a League of Women Voters chapter in your state, talk to them about it. I would love to be working with those folks. Encourage them to get in touch with me.
Okay,
or
and then
Jeff Mangan.
Some folks in Arizona were wondering if you're familiar with the Stop Dark Money initiative there, and is this different than that initiative in Arizona?
Yeah, this is different from that. I don't know all the details of that. But I am talking to folks in Arizona about getting a ballot initiative rolling there, because it's a ballot initiative state, and they think it's actually it could be a strong enough pull at the ballot to pull other issues or other candidates along as well. So this is different. This literally has not been tried anywhere. It's on incredibly solid legal ground, but it is a brand new thing. This is no one else is doing this.
Thank you. Erica, one more from the chat.
I'm still looking, so why don't you go
fine.
to Giles?
Yeah, Gilles, why don't you go ahead and jump in?
Yeah. Well, I'm from Montana too, and this is pretty exciting that we might be able to do this. After all, it was our Corrupt Practices Act being overturned that started all of this bullshit.
Yep.
But I have just a very simple question. Oh, what about the Interstate Commerce Clause?
Yeah, that's a good question. The Interstate Commerce Clause basically says, like, you can't protect the hometown guys and punish the out-of-state guys. That's basically it. You can't, that interferes with interstate commerce. You can't do that. As long as you treat everybody equally, that's fine. Where states have gotten in trouble in the past is they have favored the hometown folks and disfavored the out-of-state corporations or companies, whatever they wanted, or people. And what's a little unusual about this reform is that you kneecap your own corporations, and by doing so, kneecap everybody else. So it's as long as you treat everybody equally, you're fine on interstate commerce grounds.
Okay, great.
Would
you.
this affect ability for corporations to make donations to the DNC or the RNC?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And actually, no, actually, because they're not allowed to do that now. That is
okay.
but they would not be able to. They would not be able to. Actually, there's a question I saw in the chat. It was like, hey, this is already illegal in Minnesota to give to candidates, for corporations to give to candidates. Why would this make a difference? This is all this independent spending. They would not be able to give to Coca-Cola would not be able to give to a super PAC to spend in Minnesota if Minnesota passed this. It's not just all this direct spending with parties and candidates, where in most states, not all of them, it's illegal for companies to do that, and that has been upheld by the Supreme Court. This is all the independent spending. It's the independent spending that's really been the big problem for the last 15 years. This gets at that.
Great. Now, Constance, you had your hand up and then it went down. If you don't have a question any longer, that's fine, but I'll give you a chance. Did you come off mute?
Okay. Oh, there she is.
Howdy.
Election Initiative, the Montana Plan.com, and just try to reach out to other people like Sue, like Gilles, and just get the awareness going. I don't know, letters to editors, maybe booths at the farmers market. I am on fire for this. So that's it.
I'm
No, I
sorry,
appreciate that.
I missed the first part of what you were saying, Constance. Were you suggesting ways that people can start building?
No, Tom said it, and I'm going to follow up on those. That was my original question, is what do I as an individual and the other people I know that are like-minded, how do we take this kind of just, like laser focus and help get this, the awareness out there? And I feel like I do have that now. Thank you.
Okay, good. That was the hope.
Tom, I don't know if you want to weigh in here. This is kind of more Ruby's bailiwick, but what do you think about the politics of that? Like, if you were, Montana is an interesting state. It's not sort of stereotypically red. It's got its own things going on, but nevertheless, we would consider it to be a red state. I've heard some friends and colleagues from Tennessee and Missouri and elsewhere say we'd never pass this in our state. But in my conversations with you, it seems like you think there are strong arguments to be made from a very conservative Republican perspective in favor of this as well. What have you played around with that? Like, how do you sell this to libs and how do you sell this to conservatives?
You don't. They are on board already. I am tossing a bunch of stuff in, bunch of links into the. That looks really ugly. I'm sorry. It's too long too. Oof. All right. Well, I'll just do the poll then. Hang on a sec. This poll that was done in October. Here you go. Basically, it Republicans hate this as much as Democrats do. I mean, it's not a mistake that it is. I mean, Montana has its own special history with corporate corruption, fighting that, but it's not popular in any state among any demographic. Left, right, independent. I mean,
you're talking here about the current situation of unlimited spending, not the proposed legislation.
Well, actually, the people were asked specifically, would you support a reform like this? And the numbers were incredibly high across the board. They are a little bit higher for Democrats than they are for Republicans, but it's way over 50% for, I think it's like mid 60s% for Republicans. It is, it may be that legislatures in those states will have to be dragged across burning coals to do it. But if you've got a ballot initiative process in that state, it will pass.
Wow. Okay.
So sort of the flip side of that question, Nina was wondering what talking points are you expecting from the dark money interests when they go to argue against this ballot initiative?
That's interesting. I mean, some of us were kind of curious to see what the ringing defense of dark money is going to be. Um, Basically, it's that the Supreme Court said that corporations are associations of citizens, and you're silencing citizens who really want to speak through their corporate investments. Um, it's you're silencing speech is the basic argument. I do not think it's a matter of that. I mean, if you buy, the state creates corporations and you can invest in those. The state also creates municipal bonds and you can invest in those. But like, there's no right to speak through your municipal bonds. And kind of analytically, they're kind of the same thing. So it's there will be an argument along those lines. Um, I, I've been I have been surprised. If it's I mean, let me put it this way: there's not going to be a political argument that's going to win the day. No one's going to convince 50% of the voters that this is a bad idea. I mean, it was one of the questions in the polling that I sent the link to. Like 75% of the people supported this measure, or a measure like this. And of the people who opposed it, half of them opposed it because they didn't like the idea, and the other half opposed it because they didn't think it was going to work. But they weren't opposed to doing it. They weren't opposed to the idea of doing it. They just didn't think it's no point in doing it. If those guys get convinced that it isn't worth doing it, that's 87%. I mean, that is you'd have to convince an awful lot of people to change their minds on their thoughts about dark and corporate money and Citizens United in politics. And I just don't think that's going to happen.
I'm going to mention to folks while we have a moment, pause, that Ruby does these monthly briefings every month. It's the first Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern. I'm not 100% sure that we're due in January. Sometimes we take January off. I'll let Erica speak to that, but please do keep an eye out. This is a particularly exciting topic with Tom, and he's doing a fantastic job, but all of our briefings are really worthwhile. So encourage you all to become regulars at those briefings. And we do share the recordings with everybody, not only who attended, but everybody who registered. So if you're wondering about that, you will get it. Tom, I did see one question in the chat. I don't recall who was asking, but it was, wouldn't corporations just move and recharter in another state?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So at this point in history, if you're a big corporation, you are incorporated in Delaware. They have something like 68% of the Fortune 500 and an awful lot of other corporations, and for good reason. Not just they actually don't have the lowest tax rate. They've got a very robust court system and a well-developed sense of law, and they can give stability to corporations in a way that other states can't. But so if you're incorporated in Montana, chances are you work in Montana. Like, your corporation is based in Montana, does business in Montana, and if you want to spend money in politics, you want to spend it in Montana. You're not going to move out of state in order to do that. And if you did move out of state, then you'd be an out-of-state corporation in Montana. You still couldn't spend money in Montana's politics. Also, it is not super simple to change your corporate registration. It's not impossible, but it's not nothing. And this is not, for actual what we think of as corporations like GM and big groups like that, they'll still be able to lobby. They'll still be able to run money through their PAC and so forth. They're not going to up and move their corporate registration one place to another because they no longer have the ability to spend in politics. In some ways, it's dark money corporations exist to run all this money through and into politics, but actual corporations stores and factories and they exist to do their job. They exist to sell things. They exist to make money. They don't exist to spend in politics. And if they were relieved of the power to spend in politics, it's not clear to me that they would object, actually, because in some ways, a lot of the corporate giving that they do is extortion. It's like, oh, well, we're going to have to pay to play. We have to, we have to give to both sides in order to get good policy out of the next, administration or whatever. it's actually not their most effective use of money, and it's not the one that they choose to do first.
Interesting. Erica, any new questions that have come up?
No, let's go to Karen.
I don't see Karen. Oh, there I see.
Hi.
Hey, Karen.
Howdy.
Thanks, Tom and Ruby. This is really exciting stuff. I was trying to wrap my mind around the strategy. So, is the first 7 states, is this all about going to states that have a citizens referendum availability? So, getting it on the ballot, is that kind of the where you're going first, or is this just the states who raise their hand? And is this a mix of getting an issue on the ballot and also working through the state legislators? Is there a, yeah.
Yeah. So in order to get this really moving, I just need one state to do it. It might be that Vermont passes this in March, beats Montana, blows them out of the water. I don't know. But I just need one state to do this to get it rolling through the courts. And if the courts bless this, and there are good reasons to think that they will actually, that's nothing. It would break more of the things that they care about in order to get at this. They would have to be dismantling fundamental corporation law to get at this. So the Supreme Court may actually not want to do this. But basically, it just takes one state to pass this and zip up to the Supreme Court to get that set. I don't need 15 states to do that. I would like to get it moving in as many places as possible because I think this is something that people want, and the sooner they get it, the happier they're going to be. But and so I'm working round the clock to get this in different states. But there's no burning need in terms of the strategy to get it moving in a certain number of states.
And did I hear you say in response to Karen's question that you're putting as much energy into states without a ballot referendum process as you are states with, or did I not hear that right?
It is ending up that way. It would. I think basically just more legislators in states have reached out from states that don't have ballot initiatives. And it's kind of the word kind of has to get out a little bit more. I mean that's part of this. This is why I'm trying to talk to as many folks as possible. And legislators are hearing about it, but the citizen activists who do ballot initiatives, they're the ones who need to get the word. And even for them, it's a little tricky. Like in Montana, a lot of the groups that ordinarily would step up to do a great, good government reform are not stepping up because this affects their pocketbooks. It affects their, it affects their bottom line. And so it may be a slightly harder lift to get organizers to do ballot initiatives in a bunch of different states. I think if one state does it and it clears the Supreme Court, then that changes everything immediately. Like I think this will, you'll get tons and tons of people wanting to work on this and get it done in their states because they'll see that it can be done.
Great.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks. Michael Foxworth, you want to come off mute?
Hey, Michael.
I don't know I don't know what's wrong with my video, but anyway, I put a question in the chat. You're going after a state by state. I'm wondering, the donors from both sides spent about $16 billion in 2024, about $10 billion in the previous midterms in 2022. That's about 26 billion dollars over 4 years, averaging about $6 billion a year. Wouldn't it make a lot more sense for the government, for the U.S. government? Now you're talking about one state or a set of states. Controlling the federal government requires winning an election, but still, wouldn't it make a lot more sense for the federal government to simply put that much money into the public's pocket and spend it and just outspend all these rich people? I mean, we're talking about a really tiny percent. You're talking about $4 trillion budget, $6 billion a year. So 4 trillion versus 6 trillion. You're talking a really tiny amount of money is being spent, and it's got us by the throat.
Yeah, I mean, there's the reason this reform will work is because it doesn't involve the federal government at all. It can't involve the federal government.
I certainly agree. I certainly agree. I don't.
And
So I'm just saying that if
oh,
we're looking down the road, and we have the opportunity to ever have a functioning Congress again, of course we don't have one now, but if we
right.
ever get the chance to have a functioning Congress again, wouldn't it make more sense to simply peel off a tiny amount of money and outspend the rich?
So I don't know. It's funny. I mean, one of the stats that goes by every year is, we spend more on Halloween than we spend on our elections. That is true. It's it the way I look at it, it's not that we're spending too much money in politics. I think if we actually had terrific issue-based campaigns where the populace, the voters learned about things, through the course of the campaign because people spent a lot of money educating them, that'd be great. What I do have a problem with is rich folks dumping tons of money anonymously in, and I have a big problem with these dark money groups just pulling everybody out to the extremes, threatening to primary people on the right and the left, if they don't do their bidding. So it's that slice, big chunks of corrosive money and harmful money that I have a problem with. But if you know, my congressman, when I lived in Maryland, my congressman was Jamie Raskin. He raises a lot of money from regular folks to run his campaigns, and God bless him. I think that is okay. And the more money he raises in order to help other folks run or train leaders in the future and so forth, that's great. So I don't have it's, and setting all that aside for a moment, it would be very difficult for the government, probably unconstitutional, for the government to spend money to drown out other people's voices in elections. I don't think that could work.
Okay.
I appreciate the sentiment, though. I really do.
Okay, we're going to go to Eric, and then we'll go back to Erica to see if there's some final questions in the chat. We're just about on the hour. Tom has consented to staying a few extra minutes. So Eric, go ahead and ask your question, please.
I will do this all day.
Great. Thanks, Tom. And just been doing campaign finance reform here in Minnesota since the 1980s. So this is the most exciting thing I've heard for a long time. So thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
So I'm into kicking the tires now.
Yeah, please.
So the question is, and I may be missing something here, but so I understand super PACs, other PACs, but super PACs aren't covered under the corporate law. What would prevent a national super PAC from accepting goo-gobs of dark money through C4s nationally,
Right,
and then turning around and dumping goo-gobs of money into a state like Montana for independent expenditures? Does this prevent any of that? And if it
does,
can it?
It does, and it can.
How does it prevent it? How does it prevent it?
So it does, and it's you have identified not a problem, but basically this is one of the few areas where the more states that pick this up, the better. Money's fungible.
You don't listen to music?
No, I was listening to a Zoom call.
Hey, folks, if you could mute yourself if you're not asking a question, please. Thank you.
So say you've got a super PAC that wants to spend in Vermont and New Hampshire, and they've got $500,000 from a dark money group, and they've got $500,000 from an individual. If Vermont passes this, you couldn't spend the corporate money in Vermont, but you could spend the $500,000 from the individual in Vermont, and so then they just spend the other part in New Hampshire.
So the super PAC would have to track that money and couldn't actually spend it. So, like, if they raised 3/4 of their budget in corporate money, they could only spend a quarter of their money in Montana, let's say.
Exactly. Or any state that passed this. And so it is, you have very skillfully gotten to the very edge case of this. But that is, money's fungible, but you would not be able to spend more than you raise from individuals in a given state or a group of states that have passed this. So California passes it, New York, you're good. You're better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. No, that's a great question.
Sorry. Okay, we're a couple minutes past the hour now. Any final questions? And Erica, did you want to say anything about our January planned briefing? January inventory, perhaps?
Yes, and I was, shoot, there was one more question I found in the chat, but now I forgot it. Maybe I'll remember. But for January, our briefing is going to be on this really interesting thing that happened in Montrose, Colorado. It's called Unify Montrose, and it was a deliberative democracy process where they convened a citizens assembly to work on the problem of the lack of affordable childcare and brought together people from all over the community of all political stripes who came up with a plan that they actually got passed and funded by their town council. So it's just like a really interesting thing of what can be done when we bridge divides and regular people work together and send their good ideas upward, bottom up democracy. So that should be really interesting. Hope folks can
That'll be
come.
Wednesday the 7th, I think is the first
Yes.
Wednesday in February, 4 o'clock Eastern, Wednesday the 7th. That's very exciting. I want to point out to everybody, that's 2 months in a row that Ruby is focused on hopeful things.
We're turning over a new leaf.
That ain't easy in this day and time, folks. 2 months in a row, things to really be excited about.
Okay, I did find one more question. So Tom, you had talked about some of the reasons you think this will be fairly immune to the Supreme Court overturning it, no matter how badly they want to. But what about state Supreme Courts? What kind of legal arguments are the corporations going to make at the state level?
I think it'll go to federal court immediately because it is a federal, it is Citizens United, a federal right that's being that would seem to be abridged. I don't. Let's put it this way: if it passes as a constitutional amendment by the voters in a state, it is constitutional in that state. I mean, that's the one way or the other. That is the constitution of that state. Like if we, in the federal constitution, if we passed something saying, white people can't vote anymore, that would be constitutional by definition. So, if something is, if you had it as a statute in a state law in a state, and then there was something in the state constitution that conflicted with that, that is where a state Supreme Court might get involved. But if it's in the Constitution, they can't. I mean, it, by definition, is constitutional. And also, it just doesn't. This really doesn't. I mean, it's like there are discrete provisions in every state's statutes that say the legislature can change up these powers at any time. And the Supreme Court has said there's cases from the 1870s and 80s, but there's still good law. They can make these changes for good reason, bad reason, no reason, and it doesn't matter who they hurt. I mean, it's kind of the authority of states to do this has been generally recognized as being just astonishingly broad. So a state court wouldn't really have any problem with it, I don't think.
Thank you. And Sue, from Montana, Sue, you have popped back up. Did you have one final question or comment?
Yeah, I hope this isn't redundant, Tom. I've had a hard time understanding what exactly would happen and what the Supreme Court knows would happen if they rule against this. I understand that it affects corporate law, but I don't know what they'd be throwing out with the bathwater or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's a great question.
Good.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. Thank you. So basically, there's a lot of different things. One is that corporate law is state law. That has been the case in America for 200 years. They would have to throw that out. There's a difference between if you're going after regulations versus going after powers, and it's kind of an interesting thing. Courts hold erasers, not pens. If there's a regulation that there's a law and you add something to it, and the court says, no, we don't like that, they can take an eraser to it and say you can't enforce that anymore. They basically restore the status quo if it's a regulation. If you're on this side, if you're on the power granting side, and you give your corporations 3 powers, and the court says, no, you really need to give them this 4th power, this power to spend in politics, you got to give them that. They don't have the tools to do that. Courts can't do that. They have an eraser, not a pen. Only the legislature has a pen. Only the legislature can make this list longer. So in order to get at this, the Supreme Court would have overturn that, which is an absolutely basic separation of powers issue. And it's the kind of thing where I think they would see that that is probably not a good idea because there are a lot of unforeseen consequences on it. There's a good reason, courts do not pick up pens and write things into law. And you can see why Chief Justice AOC at some point might be perfectly happy to use that power if this court gave it to her. They're not going to do that. But thank you. That's a great question.
Okay, we're going to take one more. Constance is back in the queue, and I'm going to go. And before you go and give our final question, Constance, I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to thank Tom for this vigorous and incredibly easy to understand presentation about this issue. It is really one of the most exciting things we've learned of in recent months and years. So thanks so much, Tom. Constance, go ahead
My pleasure.
and ask your question and we'll close out.
Yeah, I hope it's a simple one. So I was interested in this, and then I saw that Austin Knudsen, I thought, had killed it. So how did it get back? I thought he
Yes.
nixed it.
So the Montana Attorney General nixed it's thrown a roadblock in the way. We expected this for months. He nixes most amendments that are going through. He's very conservative. If he has a policy problem with it, he'll ding it. It was basically in Montana, and this is true in a lot of places, you can't have an initiative that asks two different questions. We want to ban abortion and cut your taxes in half. It's like, okay, that should really be two separate questions. He dinged it on those grounds. The Transparent Election Initiative immediately filed a lawsuit challenging that. A remarkably weak response came in from the Attorney General's office. It's before the Montana Supreme Court right now. They're expected to rule in the next week or two. And if they rule against it, basically the Transparent Election Initiative will have a new ballot initiative filed within 24 hours. They're not ruling on the constitutionality of it. It's just, what's the form that it takes as it's trying to get to the ballot. And any of the problems that they identify, can be fixed. So it's a bump in the road. It's absolutely one we expected. We'd have been shocked if it didn't happen.
Okay, that's good.
Thanks, Constance.
Again, Tom, thank you so very much. This has been exhilarating. And we're grateful to the 170 some people that participated. And let's do something with this, folks.
Yeah.
We will hopefully see many of you at our January briefing. And of course, we'd love it if you'd become familiar with Ruby. We do a lot of things beyond the briefing that are helping to build a better country and overcome the divide. And we'd love you to be part of that. So thanks again to everyone and take care.
Thanks, everybody.